So we're going to do some cocooning, continuing with the breath and relaxation. And the cocoon is just a going in and cultivating along with the breath, the practice of listening to our own onboard, innate, divine intelligence that we are all born with. So we are doing and taking on the mental gymnastics of refocusing and reclaiming and pulling our attention back in from all the stimulus that is drawing, triggering, and stimulating our attention to go outward. So we're reclaiming and pulling it back in. So that is a part of the process of the cocoon, right? It's a turning in, it's going in, just like the butterflies. I don't know if any of you have seen butterflies in their cocoon phase, but it is an intentional, it's being very, very intentional. Greetings. It is being very intentional about turning inward, pulling your attention inward. It's very practical. No religion is needed. No gurus are necessary. It's just an intentional turning in. So our access point to turn in is going to be the breath primarily. And so we have our eyes right now that are looking outward. But as we close our eyes, because your eyes can be open or closed when you go into just intentional deep relaxation. Today, we're going to close our eyes so that we can assist ourselves in intentionally and consciously turning inward. So as we turn inward and shut the physical eye, then for a moment we can be more aware of the internal vision of thought. So we can start to become more present to a literal picture screen that is in the mind. So there's a communication and we can start to become aware. So it's not with the physical eye, but then we can become more aware of the memories, the stored memories, pictures, all different types of things, right? In terms of our consciousness expressing itself with thoughts, right? And there are pictures forming in the mind. So we're shutting the physical eye just for a few moments to turn in and just to stay present to the screen, not a physical screen, but the flurry of thoughts that are pictures that are going along in our mind. So our access point is going to be the breath, and we're also using the eyes for another layer of awareness as we close our eyes and just draw for a moment, draw our attention inward, and then we can just start to notice, wow, there's still a whole screen of pictures like a movie going on, but it's just from memories, and the memories we're giving meaning through our subconscious, right? So that's what we're going to do today, and then we're going to focus on some other aspects of the cocoon. So you're welcome to find a comfortable space. If you have issues with your back or your knees, you're welcome to sit upright in a chair that gives you some good back support. And your pelvis, like your hips, the bowl of your hips, your pelvis, you want to make sure that you turn it. A lot of times we may not notice that it's this way. You want to turn it upward so your pelvis and your belly button are going in the direction of your nose. So that will help to line up your lower back, so it can help to give you support if your lower back is supported. And in addition, we can just gently take our belly button and slightly draw it in towards the spine. That way, the spine has some support, so we're pulling it in, so it's just not all thrown out of place, right? We can roll our shoulders around, down, and back, so they're not hiked up here. We have a good amount of blood flow and oxygen flow between your ear and also your shoulder, right? And so we're closing the eyes today. We're inhaling and exhaling still through the mouth. So kind of if you think of like a conch shell and the sound of the ocean, and the air is traveling through this hollow portion of the throat, so you can hear it, right? Almost like if I have, kind of like if you think of Darth Vader, when he's breathing very heavily. I also like the visual of the conch shell. So it's very hollow that way. That can help you if you're struggling, or you may notice that your inhale is very, very short, and it's easier for you to exhale, but you may not realize, or you may become more aware that your inhale is very short. So that means we're not breathing deeply in terms of taking in lots of oxygen. If you have notice whatever sounds come up for you organically as you go into your own process of relaxation. So today, our contemplation in the cocoon, right? So we're tapping into our own divine, onboard, innate intelligence, right? There's an intelligence that resides within the body that wants to take in breath so that we can be awake. It gets excited about learning new things, right? It's constant communication between this plane that we're on and our inner intelligence. Again, it's something that we are all born with. And so one of the main objectives of the cocoon is to literally cultivate inner trust, the inner listening and an inner trust, right? Because there's a communication all the time, right? In technical terms, we have a sympathetic and a parasympathetic nervous system. There are sensors that are on receptors all over the skin that can interpret if we're touching water, if the skin is wet. It can interpret if we're walking on sand. It can interpret if we're walking on a stable or unstable surface. So mechanically, we have all kinds of receptors, right? We also have receptors inside the brain that can have nociceptors that are responsive to pain, right? We have receptors that are sensitive to heat and warmth and light. So there is literally a physiological and tangible, right? There is a tangible communication system. And then we have other aspects of this divine being that we all have sitting here right now. Part of it is silent, right? And then it's also audible. It comes out onto this earth plane we express, right, in this particular reality. So it's already really practical. So today, in going into the cocoon, there are several contemplations that you're invited to communicate with yourself. Now, if anything doesn't resonate, it's fine to leave it right here. Whatever you feel comfortable or not comfortable. You may want to ask yourself if you are triggered or something comes up for you that makes you feel uncomfortable, or if you're angered, in that sense, if something is triggering your emotions, then I invite you to either leave it right here, or you're also invited to ask your intelligence why and listen out for the answer, which may come now or may come a little later. So if you're still nice and comfortable and relaxed, I'd like to invite you to take a few deep breaths. And a question to ask of your own divine innate intelligence, and I'll be communicating with mine. And you understand there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of answers or where this could apply or not apply. The question that we're tuning into is, why don't I trust myself? Right? Why don't I trust myself? So I invite you sometimes when you're moving around, particularly and when it's really, really quiet in the early morning, to ask yourself, do I trust myself? Today, though, in particular, why don't I trust myself? So the context today is, if there are things that you know, right, this, from that divine intelligence that's communicating to you that it's time to stop eating, or I need some hydration, or I need something to liquid, or I need green juice, or I need to sleep and take a nap. That's a communication. So if we're not heeding those communications, if we're ignoring those communications, if we're not honoring that communications, then I invite you to ask why, and I invite you to consider that there is a lack of trust. Even, let's say, perhaps we might say, I don't have enough time. Still, I invite you to consider, if we're not trusting that communication, if we're not heeding that communication of, I need to sleep, I need rest, and you're getting clear direction from something inside, I invite you to consider, why don't we trust the importance of that communication? And further, why isn't that communication more important than everything else that's coming from the outside? So why don't I trust myself? If I have an urge to go to the bathroom to release waste and I ignore it, we may not realize that it becomes habitual almost to ignore the signals of the body. And if we ignore something long enough and it becomes a mental habit and a physical habit, then that would say that we're ignoring all day long, weeks, months, years of ignoring. And one of the places where this shows up is in our health. So again, it's easy to focus on the tangible things, right? The physical weight, and we can see adipose tissue, or we can note that we don't have a lot of energy, or we may even notice that we have a hard time eliminating. But I invite you to consider, why isn't there such a level of trust that we will move with a sense of urgency because we trust this inner intelligence so much? And if there isn't a listening, I invite you to consider why. It would be a great idea in the cocoon and cocooning and going in more to take out your journal and to just write it down. So what you can start to see in this process is where there's often, with many of us as human beings, so I always keep myself humbly in that same space and don't take anything for granted, no matter how much live foods or what my prior accomplishments are. I'm very humble because I'm very, very aware of how easily programmable our mind and our mental activity is, how easily influenced it is. So when we can all, pretty much most of us, I would think, can acknowledge a huge disconnect between the things that we know to do and the things that we don't follow through on, things that we can actually do on our own. And we can appease, ourselves with excuses, perhaps many valid excuses. I invite you to consider, why isn't there an urgency of importance, right? We wait for doctors or professionals to tell us that, we're in a state of crisis. Now we have to take medications or surgery, when all along we knew that there are many, many different things that we can be doing to relieve stress. At this point in time, there's so much access to information. So I invite you to take out your journal and to consider, why don't I trust myself? Why don't I believe in myself? And being very specific, the aspect of self, as we're identifying ourselves, right? Because your self, it's not just your physical body. In particular, the intelligence, the communication is something that is not necessarily even in pictures. There's a knowing, there's an intuition that's communicating different things to you and different instructions. Wow, it'd be a great idea for us to sleep, or we'll feel really good to sleep right now, or I don't need to eat anything, but we'll be continually munching the whole time that this knowing is there. So I invite you to consider, why am I not trusting myself? And as you sit with this, you may start to become present to this is something, a common occurrence. And there are levels to it. There may be some areas where you do trust yourself. But I would say the human condition for many of us is there are certain things, and usually specific things around our wellness and our well-being, that we subject ourselves to or put ourselves in harm's way. And so it says, rather than, one of the common things that we do is beat up on ourselves, I invite you to have a healthy dose of curiosity to come from, rather than a space of judgment, to come from a space of curiosity. How is it I've known what to do all the time, and yet I'm not moving with a sense of urgency? Because what connection shows up in response to the communication, right? Response to the communication. And I invite you to sit with it in quiet, and or to journal. And I invite you, similar to a mantra, to ask this question over and over and over. Because the more that you ask the question, the more you will start to cultivate a listening, an internal listening that is quite humbling. And it's actually really a simple process. The other part of the cocoon, this part of the process, is we're going to use something, a physical representation, right? Because we can come up with all our different interpretations, and we can get very philosophical as human beings, and we have our big brains. But I invite you to look at nature, right? So nature, I swear to you, I really invite folks that I work with to start to grow something. Even if you think you don't have a green thumb or you're not good at plants, even if the plant doesn't survive, it's going to click off a certain type of, or ignite a certain type of connection and intelligence. So today, I invite you, as homework in this part of the cocoon, to go online. You can look on YouTube or Google Images, and to pull up a dung beetle. And you're going to observe. You may look at several different videos of a dung beetle. And I want you to listen to some of the latest science. There's a TED Talk, recent talk, on the dung beetle, also known as a scarab. And I want you to see the actual, we're not necessarily right now going to go into glyphs or Kemetic, aka what some people call Egyptian culture or mythos. We're going to look at an actual example in nature. I want you to observe and listen to the dung beetle, and I want you to see it, because the visual is going to give you, you're going to intentionally put a deposit or another frame of reference into your own mind. So you can tell me what you can find. But this little creature over the years I found is absolutely amazing, amazing. So first of all, one of the wonderful things about the symbol of this dung beetle, it's literally rolling its eggs in shite. in shite. And so just think of that. It's an egg, and life is going to come out of shite. So I think that is a powerful, it's a really powerful symbol, in particular when you can go lay your eyes on it and you can go see something actually in nature that has the scent, right? So think of, when we think of shite, it's just so horrible and it's so smelly, that these particular creatures in nature look for the shite and they secure their eggs in shite and are rolling it into this ball. So I'd like you to note the size of the dung, how big it gets, and the size of the beetle. So I know for me, one of the things that I thought was really powerful in first becoming aware of the scarab, right, in nature. So people can have their different interpretations on the glyphs and the mythos. But just the fact that life is coming forth out of a shitey situation, I think that is super powerful. So that to me is a super power. There is there is a creature rolling the next generation of life, right? And it's coming out, life is coming forth out of dark dung, out of a shitey situation, out into the light, right? So I really invite you to just take a couple of moments to pull it up and look up at the dung beetle and see if you can find also the TED Talk. So you can see some of these things. They've been studying dung beetles for a while. And you can see sometimes the little beetle scarab fall off of the ball of dung. And it's so small, it gets disorientated. But check this out. This little creature somehow has some kind of internal mechanism. So let's go back a minute. Your divine onboard innate intelligence or communication. Somehow it readjusts itself like a compass or something within it that helps it readjust itself, get back up on the ball of dung, and find its direction like an internal compass. And it is somehow has a communication or orientating itself from the position of the sun. That is friggin' amazing. So I have been observing this dung beetle for years. And so that's something I recently found out. So there's so many different things that can be said for this scarab, but what are the possibilities of that? Now, if this little beetle is rolling its eggs in shite, stinky shite, and if it falls off of, something really teeny, let's say this is the ball, and something teeny falls off of it, teeny, but it can reorientate itself like a compass, get its direction, right? Depending on where the sun is placed and where it's placed in the sky. I don't know what its eyes are like, or the warmth on its body. It's an internal communication and can reorientate itself and get back on track. Now you tell me about the implications of that and why it's such a powerful symbol. And even as you start to cultivate your garden, even if you're in a small apartment, because that's one of the things that we do in the Cocoon, just caring for it is going to unlock a whole level of intelligence, things that perhaps you didn't notice just because you weren't involved in the process of growing and nurturing something. So even if there's failure per se, you will fail forward. So just like scientists, you're going to learn through growing something. So that's why it is really essential to grow something within the cocoon. So those are the meditations today. It's one, why don't I believe and trust in myself? And then once you lay your eyes on the dung beetle, I want you to watch it over several times and come back to that same contemplation as you watch the little dung beetle fall off, lose its way, and reorient itself with an internal compass, find its direction, and keep rolling, knowing at some point that its eggs, its continuation of its life cycle, is going to come forth through that ball of dark shite, like compost. So you can think of a lotus coming forth out of mud. It's really, really powerful stuff. So with that contemplation, I'm just going to do a little more deep breathing. And the question to communicate to your own divine innate intelligence. Now, keep in mind, this could be towards your movement practice, aka what some people call fitness or exercise. I like to refer to it as vigorous, joyous movement. If you have stopped, if you haven't begun, you're going to ask yourself, being that something's a knowing, right, of many things that you should be doing, but you're not. And I want you to even ask, does that demonstrate a lack of trust in your internal communication system that doesn't need a pastor, a minister, a guru? It's to tap into. And this is we're going to suspend judgment, not common sense judgment in the sense of condemnation, just an observation, just from the point of like your own scientist of observing how your own psyche works. And I invite you to see what comes up for you, if it comes up now or while you're moving around during the course of the day, preparing your food. See what comes up for you, because this is a different approach other than trying to be in control or trying to diet or beat yourself into submission, because we know that usually is not sustainable and that usually doesn't work. So I invite you to go into a cocoon of your own choosing, intentionally choosing to turn your focus and attention in, and your access point is your breath. The breath is giving you access to relaxation. So you can slow down. You can really, really slow down, and there's space for intentional thoughts, right? And intentional access and intentional listening to your own communication that's from within, that's connected, direct. Just going to take a few more deep breaths. And the question is, why don't I believe in myself? And why don't I trust myself? So if you've asked the question, why don't I believe in myself or trust in myself? You're welcome to go maybe perhaps a little bit farther and notice, well, when did I stop trusting myself? Well, how is it I didn't notice the communication, internal communication that is already within me? I know there's a knowing that I know what to do or what to pursue. So what is the disconnect? I invite you to breathe and have compassion for yourself. This is not a time to beat up on yourself, and that would defeat the process. This contemplation is for the sole purpose of being an investigator and to have a healthy curiosity around the disconnect. Okay? So that you can, with patience, just like the patience you would have with a child, to start to tune in and give yourself access and space, emotional and mental space, to reconnect and notice what comes up for you. So I'm excited to hear what comes up for you in your journal. And it may not come up now, may not come up tomorrow. However, if you continue with the practice, perhaps even as you're moving around your house and you're cleaning today and you're preparing beautiful, delicious, healthy food for yourself, you can even go further in the practice and ask yourself out loud, literally like talking or communication to yourself. You know, you already know you're not crazy or anything, but it's highly intelligent to communicate with yourself. And the purpose of communicating out loud is to be very intentional and to filter through, because there's so many different communications and thoughts going on at one time. It never stops. So you want to hear clearly the voice of communication, one of the particular routes of communication, so that you can support yourself and get some clarity so you can proceed forward and cultivate a really firm foundation, right? So this is an exploration And it's holding space for yourself, being gentle and being a good listener, cultivating listening skills. Just like we want to cultivate communication and listening skills with other people, we may become aware that we're not even listening to ourselves. So as we listen to ourselves in the most practical way and ask questions and listen for the answer, likely we'll become better communicators with other people. All right, so hope you all create a great rest of the day for yourself, very purposefully, whatever's going on around you, intending and being very intentional about creating a day for yourself, a day that you can feel proud of yourself, even from taking quiet time for yourself, even intentionally if it's going right now and getting a glass of water, even if it's, you know what, let me see what vegetables I have in the refrigerator and what I can prepare without a bunch of oil or whatever for myself. These are things that really will literally start to reconnect you and restore integrity as you do things intentionally to nourish and to put a deposit in your healthy 401k, your aura 401k, your vitality 401k, being very intentional about making deposits. So catch the wave of good feeling as you restore your confidence and you start to build your confidence in yourself. Okay. See you soon. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. This is just a taste of some of the things that we're going over in the Cocoon. We're doing a lot of practical exercises in terms of a movement practice and food preparation. But a lot of it is the foundation. It's first here. It's mental, developing a really firm, solid relationship, right? Solid relationship with your essence, right? Whatever it is that you want to call it. All right, see you soon.